Hey, everybody, welcome. So, yeah, I'm just going to give you a reaction to what we just saw, Donald Trump's State of the Union speech 2026. Uh, the other. But yeah, I'm just going to react to what we just saw. And this won't be a normal live. This will just be me reacting. And then if you've got questions or anything you want me to respond to, you can send to buy me a coffee. Go to calebmaupin.com. I'm sorry, go to buymeacoffee.com/Caleb Maupin, and I'll answer that at the end, basically. At the end, we might do a short roll call and then I'll answer questions, but I'm just going to jump right into it. So, yeah, let's do it. All right. So, folks, I got to tell you, Trump is doing very badly in the polls right now. Americans are unhappy with the way the economy is and a lot of other things. And Donald Trump, I will say, as a president here in his second term, I'm not very impressed either. I'm quite disappointed in how he's doing and the policies that he's implemented. He seems to have broken and not fulfilled a lot of what he promised to do in terms of foreign policy, in terms of making peace. He's not protecting civil liberties like he said he would. But that said, I think he did a great job tonight. I think this speech may actually help him in the polls. I think Trump looked great tonight. I think he looked excellent, and he made points that hit home with all kinds of people. And I think he may get a little bit of a boost in the polls because of this. Now, I thought the worst part of the speech was the foreign policy part, and I'll be taking that apart. But honestly, until he started talking foreign policy, he looked very, very good. And it really just gets down to what he's up against. The Democratic Party is so corrupt and so entitled and so elitist. I was thinking tonight, as Trump was speaking, about the 2016 election and how Hillary Clinton just assumed she would win. They'll never let Trump be president. So she lied about her health and pretended that that she wasn't sick. And then she collapsed at the 9/11 ceremony, and just event after event. And they had, they tried to humiliate Trump with the recording of him in the changing van in the locker room with the other guy, and they thought they had him, and Trump won in 2016. And then I think about how Trump won in 2020, and it was a similar kind of thing in 2024. I mean, when Trump was up against Kamala Harris, and Kamala Harris lied and didn't work at McDonald's, and so Donald Trump went and worked at McDonald's to make a point about Kamala Harris lying about that, and Biden called Trump's supporters garbage, and Trump, what did he do? He obviously, drove a garbage truck, and Trump is trying as a politician. He thinks he has to earn the votes and the trust of the American people. The Democrats don't. And the Democratic Party has spit in the face of the people they expect to vote for them over and over and over again. And so all Trump has to do is phone it in. He just has to try like any other politician, right? He's basically, what is Trump's motivation? I mean, the guy is 80 years old. He's going to die. He's not, why does he want to be in office? He wants to be in office. It's an ego thing, right? And he wants the payout of being the president, right? And it's a great boost. He wants to be liked. He wants to be celebrated. And so he's trying because he's seeking the validation of being a head of state and having a lot of people look up to him and admire him. And he's trying, and the Democrats don't feel that they have to try. The Democrats are so much reliant on the powers that be and the rich and powerful that they don't have to try. And tonight we saw Democratic Party dysfunctionality on display more than anything else. And I mean, that's really what it gets down to. Trump, he basically just let the Democrats display their dysfunctionality, raked them over the coals for the ways in which they have not lived up to their own principles and their own teachings. Trump isn't doing a great job as president, but he's up against a self-defeating machine, a self-defeating entity that is just, I mean, the Democratic Party is its own worst enemy. The Democratic Party just cannot deliver any policies that would, improve the people that they claim to care about. They just cannot stand up or advocate really for what they claim to stand for. The Democratic Party might as well just be called the hypocrisy party. right? And they are just the party of broken promises, the party of betrayal, the party of gaslighting, the party of insane wokeism. And all Trump has to do is just kind of come out there and say, you guys suck, and this is what I've done, even though it's modest, and he looks good. And Trump looked great tonight. And he said a lot of things that I'm going to disagree with. The most awful part was the part about foreign policy. And we're going to get into what that was about, right? And there's a lot behind the scenes. I mean, he was really sucking up to the military tonight. And he was really sucking up to the military. But I'm going to go through the speech. I have a lot of notes here because there's a lot to go through. And we're just going to go through it, through the different statements that he made. I'm going to touch on a couple different aspects tonight. I'm going to touch on the accuracy of what was said, because there were a lot of things that I think that are contested, that are not accurate. He said a lot of things that I don't think are true, or don't make sense exactly. So that's one thing that we're going to talk about, right? We're going to just talk about the accuracy. We're going to talk about Trump's background, and how Trump personally sees things. We're also going to talk about what he was trying to do from a psychological or political standpoint, right? We're gonna hit it from that angle also, and how this served, how this was effective, for Trump in terms of appealing to his base and supporters, etc. So we're gonna hit this from a few different angles tonight. So I hope that you enjoy it. So the first remark that stood out early in the speech, Donald Trump said it was the golden age of America. That's not true. And the whole world knows that. And Americans know it. That statement was so out of touch with reality. The whole world knows that America and the West in general is in decline. The West is having problems like you wouldn't believe. But he called it, the golden age of America. Well, I mean, the golden age of America, you could say, was the 1950s, when after the Second World War, the United States was the center of the world economy, had the world's largest and highest standard of living. But U.S. standard of living is dropping. U.S. society is way more divided and unstable than ever before. Living standards are going down very significantly, which his speech had to acknowledge, right? As much as he tried to gloss over that, America is becoming a poorer and poorer country. This is not the golden age of America. I mean, it's just not. And the whole world knows that. And Trump knows that. And the Democrats know that. And the Republicans know that. And everybody knows that. That statement, it's the golden age of America, that fits with Donald Trump's approach, which we saw throughout this. I mean, Donald Trump's religion, and we're going to talk about Donald Trump's religious beliefs in particular, right? He went to his father, Fred Koch, took him to the church of Reverend Norman Vincent Peale in Manhattan, the guy who wrote The Power of Positive Thinking. And we're going to talk about Donald Trump's religious beliefs, right? His spiritual advisor is Paula White Cain. They really do believe in just saying what you want to be true. And, in this kind of the power of belief, the power of intention. And that came across. He said a lot of things that I think in his heart he knows are not true, but wants to be true. And we're going to get into that. Now, the other thing tonight, before I get to anything further that he said, and that I think is just classic, is that there were so many moments where, sitting behind Trump, you have J.D. Vance, the vice president, and you also have behind him Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House. And there were so many moments where especially J.D. Vance had this look on his face that's like, I don't know about that. Not sure about that. It was funny. It's like, yeah, not sure I buy that one. It was really funny. And Mike Johnson too. Mike Johnson was a little bit better in his facial expressions. There were so many times where Trump would be like, I am making the best economy ever. Everything in America is amazing. And JD Vance would be like, not sure about that, and it was very, very amusing. I mean, the facial expressions of Vice President Pence and Mike Johnson, but especially Vice President Pence, were hilarious. They were hilarious. And the facial expressions tonight were very, very important. Okay. And I'm going to talk about that throughout tonight. I mean, there was a lot that was not put into words tonight. There was a lot of gesture and facial expressions. It's very, very, very important tonight. We're going to talk about that later. But this whole speech, you could call it, JD Vance doesn't buy it. That's what this speech could have been called. You know, Donald Trump would say something and JD Vance would be like, huh, you know, JD Vance was up there. In a way, you could almost argue JD Vance was kind of undermining Trump, and that, you know, if Trump is ousted, JD Vance will be president, and that could actually come out to help JD Vance in the future, right? If Trump is ousted, you know, which, I mean, stuff is surfacing now. If Trump ends up getting impeached or removed from office, it could really help JD Vance. You know, these clips of him looking like he's not fully on board with stuff Trump is saying. So yeah, you know, the economy is roaring like never before. Never before, really. When our roads and bridges are falling apart, low wage, short term service sector jobs. I mean, give me a break. Give me a break. America's respected again like never before. Really. Go to Europe. Is America respected? Go to South America. All right. You know, it used to be that when the USA ganged up on Venezuela or condemned Venezuela or Nicaragua or Cuba, the rest of South America went along with it. Now, there's more sympathy for Venezuela, for Cuba, for Nicaragua than before because Trump is just so hated. You know, you go to Europe, the European countries all hate Trump, the NATO countries hate Trump. The South American and Latin American countries all hate Trump. You know, Trump is quite unpopular. You know, there's a lot of love for Trump in India in particular because of, you know, his relationship with Modi. But that, you know, is an issue. There's a lot of love for Trump in Israel. You know, India, Israel, that's where Trump is liked, where the USA maybe has more respectability. But you go to Asia, the USA has lost a lot of credibility. You go to Europe, the USA has lost a huge amount of credibility, respected like never before. And so then there were a number of things he said tonight that were true about the economy, but then there were a number of things he said tonight that, like, how do you know? Right? For example, 0 illegal aliens entered the United States this year. Well, here's the thing. Illegal aliens entering the United States is not something that you announce, right? They don't like announce, I'm an illegal alien, I am crossing the border. No, they sneak in. So it's very possible some illegal aliens did enter the country. They, you know, came, you know, over the Canadian border, came over the Mexican border, came, you know, on a ship. They stowed away and like smuggled into the country on a ship. It's very, very possible that illegal aliens entered the country, but we just didn't detect them. Generally, you know, if we're detecting them, we prevent them from doing that. So how can he say that? 0 illegal aliens entered the country. You can't say that because they don't announce themselves, right? People don't announce when they do things that are committing a crime. So yes, you know, the US-Mexico border is more heavily policed and surveilled than ever before, sure, but that's not the only way people enter the country. And especially in terms of human trafficking, for example, you know, a lot of that is people entering the country over the Canadian border. A lot of that is people entering the country on ships, right? That you know, they get smuggled in, you know, through ships. They're carrying cargo. You know, you can't say that no illegal aliens have entered the country. That's just, you just can't say that because they don't announce themselves. And the same thing with, you know, that the flow of fentanyl is down. Again, how do you know that? How do you know that? How do you measure that? You know, again, people smuggling drugs into America don't announce, I am smuggling drugs into America. Take a note. This is, my bag has this much drugs in it. So that way, I mean, you can't measure that, right? Some of these things you can measure. Some of these things you cannot. And you can't say that no illegal immigrants entered the country. And I can guarantee you that at least one illegal immigrant did enter the country at some point. Somebody made it over the Canadian border. Somebody made it in through a ship or something. You know, the amount of human trafficking that goes on, of people that are smuggled into this country to do slave labor or for whatever reason, there was at least one person smuggled into America. Like, of course there was. And in terms of the fentanyl, again, you know, do people track that? Do people track how much, you know, I mean, you can't measure that. Another thing I wanted to touch on. So he honored his father, Fred Trump, right? And that's interesting. That's very, very interesting. He didn't have to do that, right? Trump did that for some very deeply personal or psychological reason. That served a purpose that was personal for Trump. And you look at Trump's life story, right? Fred Trump was Trump's father, who was a real estate conglomerate in New York City. and had many children. German American guy, prominent business owner here in New York City, had many children. Donald Trump was the son that he didn't like, right? Donald Trump was Fred Trump's least favorite son. And Fred Trump actually sent young Donald Trump to a military boarding school known for straightening out young men that are discipline problems, basically. And Trump went to a military boarding school in upstate New York that was very harsh, where he was paddled pretty frequently, and he was endured a lot of very harsh military, like it was like a boot camp basically. He went to for 4 years because his dad considered him to be a household discipline problem. So that's interesting. So it seems like on some level Trump wanted to give his father his due. Now, during the 2016 campaign, they brought up different things about Fred Trump. One thing is that Fred Trump, just like a lot of landlords in New York City at the time, practiced racial discrimination, right? That because it was believed at the time, which, I mean, this is part of racism, is that, it was believed, it's still believed, right, that if black people move into your neighborhood, property values go down, right? That is widely believed, right? That's why there's a lot of racism. That's why there was such a big effort by a lot of white racists to block neighborhood integration. And it's also believed that if you have people of color living in your building, the value of your building will go down. And Fred Trump didn't want to lose the money. And Fred Trump, I mean, was probably pretty racist. And so, I mean, it was understood Fred Trump developed a reputation for engaging in racial discrimination in his renting. And that was brought up. And I guess Woody Guthrie, there was an obscure, album song by Woody Guthrie, kind of condemning the racism of old man Trump. The other thing is that Fred Trump was arrested at a Ku Klux Klan rally in the 1920s. But the story of that is really interesting. Very, very interesting. Fred Trump, Donald Trump's father was a German American Protestant. And in New York City in the 1920s, the police were largely Irish Catholics. And the Ku Klux Klan had a rally against the Catholic NYPD. They felt that Protestant people were being discriminated against. They felt that the NYPD was cooperating with the alcohol, the illegal alcohol. This was during the time of Prohibition. So the Ku Klux Klan had a rally against the NYPD. And Fred Trump attended this rally. He wasn't a Klan member. That no one can prove he was a member of the Klan. But the Ku Klux Klan, which was a big group among Democrats at the time, right? Woodrow Wilson had kind of revived the KKK, and so they had an anti-NYPD rally because they hated Catholics, because the NYPD was Irish Catholics, and they felt the NYPD was corrupt. It was Irish Catholics. They wanted police officer jobs for good Protestant Americans, not these Irish scum or whatever. It was a rally against the Catholic NYPD. And the reason Fred Trump was arrested at it is the NYPD showed up and there was a scuffle. There was a fist fight, and the NYPD and the Ku Klux Klan had a big fight in Queens. And Fred Trump was there on the Ku Klux Klan side, again, as a German Protestant against the NYPD, and he got arrested. That is fascinating, So yeah, Fred Trump was arrested at a Ku Klux Klan rally. Fred Trump was notoriously racist. Fred Trump also did not like Donald, and really hated Donald Trump, and kicked Donald Trump out of the house and sent him to a really brutal, intense military boarding school as a young man. And Donald Trump was viewed as kind of the failure son of Fred Trump. He was, the embarrassment, the disgrace, and that many people look at the way Donald Trump really worked hard to not only be a successful businessman, but also to get a huge amount of media publicity. They see that as almost a need for validation that flowed from the wound of having your father dislike you, right? Of having your father disapprove of you, right? And that's a big aspect of Trump's personality. And the reason Trump has very much wanted his name in the headlines, very much wanted to be known as a great figure, was from this trauma of having a father who thought he was shit, basically, and the pain of that. And that's something that many people have noted about Donald Trump. And I find that to be very, very interesting. Why did he mention his father by name in the speech tonight? He did not have to do that by any means. And honestly, it didn't help him to do that, right? Because of his father being arrested at a Klan rally, because of his father having practiced racial discrimination. It really didn't help Donald Trump to mention his father. But he's an old man. He's president of the United States. And you can bet that the trauma, the scar, the pain of being rejected by his father just hangs over Trump. And that the mention, the way he just dropped his father's name, he said Fred Trump was an old man, wouldn't like me saying the way he dropped his father's full name and all of that. That was heavily important. That was very psychological. We're getting a deep insight into the mind of Donald Trump. He did not have to do that. He did not gain politically from doing that. That was very interesting. And you have to wonder, right, with his son Barron, who was in the audience, with his other two sons, Eric and Donnie Jr., that were there, like what was going on there, right? If you want to understand, if you want an insight, if we want to really understand what Trump is about and trying to prove, what was that about? That was heavy, right? That was very, very, very heavy. But that we could do a whole episode just on that. So I'm going to move on from that. A couple other things, right? The lowest murder rate in 125 years. Is that adjusted for population? Is it the lowest number of murders in 125 years? Is that the lowest, is it the lowest murder rate per capita by percentage? Like, what are we talking about? I find that hard to believe, right? This is the lowest murder rate in 125 years. And what it counts as a murder, right? Because the way it works in the United States, right, is if you get arrested for murder, generally almost everybody who's charged with murder takes a plea deal. Right? You never plead guilty to murder. Murder is a very, very serious crime, right? And almost always it's negotiated down to aggravated manslaughter, in order to be convicted of murder, right? It has to be premeditated. I mean, it's so is this people convicted of murder? Is this deaths that are ruled homicides? Like, how are we determining that we have the lowest murder rate in 125 years? Right? Is it the lowest conviction of murder? I don't know what it is. Where did that number come from? I'm not saying it's wrong, but it's kind of like the no illegal border crossings. It's kind of like the no fentanyl came into the country. I mean, how are you getting this number? You can't just say things like that. I know it sounds great, right? But there you go. Now, the other thing, so he said, our new friend and partner, Venezuela. And I'm going to touch on that a little bit later, right? Because Venezuela is in a very, very odd state. And Dulce Rodriguez has made clear, like, she holds the CIA responsible for the murder of her father. They consider the kidnapping of Maduro to be illegitimate. They have not regime changed Venezuela. They kidnapped Venezuela's leader. They then put a huge amount of pressure on Venezuela and offered Venezuela a lot of money to start selling oil to the United States, lifted a lot of sanctions, but also surrounded them and blocked them from sending any oil to Cuba. Like, Venezuela is in kind of a position where they're backed against a wall. They're cooperating with the United States reluctantly. Their president, who they still consider to be their president, is held in Manhattan. There hasn't been a full regime change in Venezuela. And, we'll get into this later tonight, but Machado, who was got the Nobel Peace Prize for her overthrow, her efforts to overthrow Maduro. She wasn't happy. She doesn't want Dulce Rodriguez in there. And, Marco Rubio didn't look too happy tonight, and I'll get into all of that later. But, our new friend and partner, Venezuela, it's not exactly what's going on there. Not exactly what's going on. Now, he said 100% of the jobs created by his administration have been in the private sector. That's not good. That is not good, right? And that's good if you're a follower of Milton Friedman. It's good if you believe government is the problem. But the fact is, government employees tend to have way better benefits than private sector employees. Government employees have higher pay. They tend to have labor unions that either have binding arbitration and in some cases can even go on strike. Like, do you want to be a teacher at a public school or at a private school? Obviously, you want to be a teacher at a public school, right? Maybe, it'll be a little harsher conditions depending where you're at. But in terms of the pay, the salary you're going to get, in terms of the benefits you're going to get, you want to be a teacher at a public school, not at a private school. Private school teachers don't get anything near what teachers at public schools get, right? I mean, do you want to be a postal worker or do you want to work for FedEx? I mean, government jobs are a huge subsidy to the U.S. economy. Government jobs dump a lot of spending power into the U.S. economy, right? And if you eliminate the jobs of government workers, and if jobs that were done by government workers are being done by private sector employees, that's not as good. I mean, who gets paid more? Government sanitation workers that work for the New York City Department of Sanitation or some city's Department of Sanitation, or governments for some private company that is hired to go, sweep the streets. I mean, when he said that, I know why he said that, because according to the free market ideology, government jobs are bad. There's too much government spending, but government jobs provide a huge amount of spending power. It's Keynesianism, right? John Maynard Keynes, he had the idea that, if the government hires a guy to go dig a hole and then it hires another guy to go fill the hole in, that might seem like waste, but it stabilizes the economy because that both of them get paid, right? Both of those guys get paid and then they stabilize the economy. And the main way we dump money into the economy right now is with military spending. And that's, they call it military Keynesianism, the military industrial complex. But it's a way of dealing with the problems of capitalism is you have the government dump money into the economy. Well, a lot of that money is going to weapons manufacturers, right? I mean, weapons manufacturers are doing great, but very few human beings are employed in weapons manufacturing these days. Weapons manufacturing tends to be done by robots. And in the age of AI, you really don't need that many people to make bombs and tanks and weapons like you once did. Yes, it used to be that if they were making tanks, there was a whole factory of hundreds of guys who would assemble those tanks. Not so much anymore, right? So, there's still a lot of government spending on the military, but that's not trickling down into the private sector in the way that it once did into the public, into the spending power in terms of the public, right? And this is the problem of capitalism, overproduction, the tendency of the falling rate of profit, that as technology advances, the ability of the worker to buy back what he produces is constantly decreasing. This is a problem. So Trump getting up there and saying 100% of the jobs I've created, all the jobs I've created have been in the private sector, that means those jobs are paying less, largely. That's what that means. The public sector pays more than the private sector. The public sector has way better benefits. So there's that. All right. This was another phrase that I also thought was interesting. He said he lifted 2.4 million people off of food stamps. Lifted is the key word there. Now, U.S. President Barack Obama was the first president in history to reduce the number of people on food stamps by making you have to be poorer to get them. And that was an awful thing that Obama did. And it was in his second term, and he made it so that all kinds of people that used to get a certain level of food stamps, the amount of food stamps they got decreased. He made it so people that had certain, he basically lowered it. You had to be much poorer to get food stamps under Obama. That was a devastating policy. And so, these people have been lifted. 2.4 million people have been lifted out of food stamps. Like, maybe they should still be getting them. And again, right, that is a subsidy, right? The reason we have food stamps, let's just be clear about this, right? Supplemental nutrition assistance was not invented because we just felt sorry for poor people. It's a subsidy to American agribusiness. So one of the biggest supporters of food stamps is Kraft, the food manufacturing company, right? It keeps the economy going. It was Henry Wallace who invented the food stamps program. It's actually done through the Department of Agriculture. Did you know that? It is the U.S. Department of Agriculture that does the food stamp program because it's tied into the farm sector, right? It's not the welfare department. It's not the Department of Labor. You get your food stamps through the U.S. Department of Agriculture. The U.S. Department of Agriculture handles it. It's a farm subsidy. And again, so there's 2.4 million people that used to be getting food stamps. And now, thanks to Obama making it harder to get food stamps, somehow they no longer qualify for getting food stamps. Somehow. Now, in some cases, that might be that, they're no longer considered a child. One way that families get food stamps is because of the fact that they're children, right? Low-income parents get so many food stamps based on how many kids they have in the house. Well, if that kid, gets to be a certain age, they're no longer a child. Well, their income didn't go up. That didn't change anything. They're just no longer a child, right? So think about that, right? Their parents are no longer getting food stamps. Maybe the kid just turned 18. Like that statistic lifted 2.4 million people off of food stamps. It sounds really good on the surface of it, right? It's like, wow, there were 2.4 million people that were so poor they had to get government assistance. But now, now they're wealthy enough, they don't get government assistance. That's not the reality. If you work at Walmart, I don't know, you know this, Walmart, one of the biggest employers in America, in your training at Walmart, they give you information about how to sign up for food stamps. They basically say, we're not going to pay you enough that you can eat on your own. And in your training, they tell you how to sign up for food stamps. That is a goddamn shame. And that's one of the frustrating things, when the food stamp program went on hold during the government shutdown or whatever, there are all these people saying, oh, all these lazy people, they should all just get jobs. Most people who get food stamps have jobs. Most people who get food stamps have jobs. And basically, many of the low-wage employers these days have determined basically we'll pay people. We can get away with paying people very low wages because they'll get food stamps. Right. And so, it's the whole way the food stamps issue is people have it in their head. There's a conservative free market narrative that says everyone who's on food stamps is an unemployed single mom who just keeps pumping out babies so she can get more food stamps. That's not what's going on. The majority of people on food stamps have jobs. The majority of people who receive food stamps so they can eat are children. Right. It's just absolutely crazy. And, he says he lifted 2.4 million people off of food stamps. Yeah. If you buy into the idea that everyone who gets food stamps is a poor person, and now there's people that were poor and they're no longer poor, so they don't need food stamps, that sounds great. But anyone who's familiar with the reality of being a low-wage parent, a low-wage worker, being in a working family in America and working for poverty wages is going to tell you that number, that doesn't mean what you think it means. And that's not so good. And we have a messed up situation in America right now when it comes to food assistance, when it comes to the wages that people are making, right? So then there was a big, long section of the speech tonight where he talked about the hockey team, right? And that was on many different levels, that was important. So what happened? So the hockey team, the Olympic hockey team that just won the gold medal, the men's hockey team, they won the gold medal. They came out. Donald Trump, he Norman Vincent Peeled it. He Power of Positive Thinking did. He Paula White Caned it like you wouldn't believe. We win. We always win. We win so much. We don't know how we're going to win. Right? That's all Norman Vincent Peale. I always win. I never lose. Right? Again, it's the power of positive thinking, which there's something to. I'm a huge fan of Wallace Wattles, and that's Trump. And it's helped him get where he is. He grew up hearing that stuff from Norman Vincent Peale and others. That's Trump. But then on top of that, so he brings out the hockey team, right? Again, this is something you wouldn't know if you didn't understand the context. Who votes in this country more than anybody? Senior citizens, older folks, right? And that's why Donald Trump does a lot of Ronald Reagan nostalgia. And why the hockey team, right? He could have brought the skiing team. He could have brought the triathlon, the ice skating team. Why the hockey team? The Miracle on Ice, right? The famous Miracle on Ice. What year was it? It's a Reagan era, right? Miracle on Ice, right? It's the 1980 Olympics, right? And the American hockey team beat the Soviet Union, and after Ronald Reagan was elected president, they made this ultra patriotic movie about them winning the Olympics called Miracle on Ice that was screened everywhere, and it was like America beat the commies, and it was just a really, really, you look up Miracle on Ice. This is about 1980. This is about, this is Reagan stuff, right? And elder folks who can remember those years vote, and folks who think that this country's gone to the shit since then. This country's been going to hell since then. Remember how good they felt when they sat in the movie theater and watched Miracle on Ice, when they watched all the sports documentaries about the hockey team. This is 1980s nostalgia. And that section of the speech just went on and on and on, right? He spent a lot of time talking about ice hockey, right? And that was really, really important because of the fact that nostalgia, folks, right? And there's a lot of people watching who maybe they don't know much about economics, they don't know much about foreign policy, but they remember when the Miracle on Ice, and they have watched the sports movie about the Miracle on Ice, and they've watched brilliant, right? There's a feel-good patriotic movie from 1981 telling the story of the Olympic victory the year before. It was part of the Reagan era, the ultra patriotism of 1980s movies. It's effective propaganda, right? A very, very, very effective propaganda. Very effective. And it's nostalgia, right? Make America Great Again is a Ronald Reagan slogan. He lifted that from Ronald Reagan. And, when he gets up at the UN and says, socialism and communism is so awful, like, what are you talking about? The Soviet Union's gone. The world is very, very different. Regular old-fashioned communism is not here anymore, right? Soviet-style Marxism, Leninism isn't around anymore. You got socialism with Chinese characteristics in China. The Iranians don't have a Marxist-Leninist ideology, but they have a planned economy. Bolivarianism, the Bolivarian revolutions, those are different ideologically. Old-style Soviet communism ain't around anymore. But he's still beating the podium about communism. It's nostalgia. It's nostalgia, just like the Miracle on Ice. And again, how long was that section of the speech? How long was he going on and on and on about hockey? It's propaganda value. It's an association. People are associating hockey with the good old days, with Ronald Reagan, with when I was proud to love this country, when we were beating the Soviets, when the economy was better. Economy wasn't great in the 80s, but was much better than it is now. Very effective. Brilliant, 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 brilliant. I want to touch on a couple things. There's some stuff I might come back to, but I have a lot of notes from the speech. Look, the speech very much, I grew up in a small town in Ohio, and my town was overwhelmingly Republican. This was a speech aimed at the people in the town I grew up in. He talked about the military. A lot of people I went to school with went into the military. He talked about sports. A lot of people in my town really loved football and baseball. This was a speech, for small town working class Americans in red states, many of whom are white, right? White people don't exist according to mainstream media now, right? All poor people are black and brown. All white people are liberal hipsters who live in gentrified neighborhoods like Williamsburg and all of that. Well, no, look at a map. This country is full of white working class people. And this speech was aimed at white working class people. Not just them, but it was largely aimed at them. White working class people love sports. White working class people serve in the military. White working class people tend to be evangelical Christians. White working class people, that's, you look at who are the red states. The red states are very white and very working class, right? And mainstream media has just decided they don't exist, right? And when Richard Nixon talked about the silent majority when he ran for president in 1968, because mainstream media was always talking about the civil rights movement, and it was always talking about the campus radicals, the urban, the Ivy League schools and where you had the campus radicals. But there was just, this big layer of the country that was kind of ignored. And there's a song Okie from Muskogee that came out. And that's even more true today, right? It's just not trendy to talk about average working class white people. Yes, there are white people in prison. Yes, there are white people who die from drug overdoses, from heroin, a lot of them actually. Yes, there are white people who serve in the military, lots of them, and mainstream media and the left, the so-called left doesn't think those people exist, hates them on an ethnic level, has decided that they're all trash, they're all evil people, and if you care about them, you're a Nazi, right? That Michael Moore used to be very, very popular. Michael Moore made a film, Roger and Me. And it was a film about auto workers, a lot of whom were white, some of whom were black, but a lot of whom were white in Flint, Michigan, and about their plight. And that was a popular leftist film. Now, even though Michael Moore talks the woke line, he's not popular anymore because his films talk about low-income white people, and you're not allowed to care about them. When the white teachers, the largely white teachers of West Virginia, went on a wildcat strike in Trump's first term. They had a wildcat strike. They went on strike against their health care plan. And it was, they all called in sick and they won. It was a huge labor victory. When that happened, the leaders of the Workers' World Party of West Virginia put on their Facebook page that the teachers of West Virginia should pay reparations rather than going on strike. And then they put a meme that said, "One settler, one bullet." Unbelievable. Absolutely despicable. But then what happened? The Workers' World Party leaders, no, they drove out the people in the party from Detroit that drove down to West Virginia to support those white teachers, right? Because the class line doesn't exist, right? And you're not allowed to care about them. And this is where the woke stuff gets very dangerous, because there are millions and millions of poor white people in Oklahoma, millions of poor white people in New Mexico, millions of poor white people in Appalachia, millions of poor white people in Pennsylvania and Ohio and all of that. And the left has decided they don't matter. And I'm going to talk more about the Democrats and how the Democrats, again, Trump isn't doing a great job as president, but the Democrats are just their own worst enemies. And, but anyhow, and some of the stuff he did, I thought was great. No taxes on tips, no taxes on overtime. That was great. Also, did you notice the military guy was there with his daughter? That's really important, right? Military, families, right? So it wasn't just the military guy. It was there with his daughter, right? Showing, a dad in the military. That hit home with a lot of people. There's a lot of people that have a relative in the military or in the police, and and feel like no one cares about them and all of that. But again, Trump couldn't cover up the reality. The homeschooling mom, right? So you had a homeschooling mom there, right? And it was all about how she's a homeschooling mom who benefited from Trump's policies. Why? Because she waits tables at night while the dad works in a factory handling heavy machinery. Boom. Boom, right? So, it sounds good, right? Trump is sticking up for mom. Why can't the dad working in a factory all day pay for mom to be at home homeschooling? Why does homeschooling mom have to then go and wait tables every night and get tips just to make ends meet? That's wrong, right? I was a kid. There were when I was in my little town in Ohio, up the street from me, there were 2 or 3 families that homeschooled, and the dad worked all day. I worked at Smucker's Jelly. It was like a guy, and the mom did not have a job, and she stayed home and she homeschooled the 5 or 6 kids. A lot of evangelical families are like that. The dad is a hardworking dad who, is, working someplace, and the mom stays home with the 5, 6, 3 or 4 kids and homeschools them all day, right? Homeschooling is a very unique American thing. I don't think it became legal until like the 70s. It was a big part of the evangelical Christian right. But generally, homeschooling families have always been the father works and the mom stays home and is the teacher for the kids. And the fact that, Donald Trump is up there, he's got a homeschooling mom, and, she's probably an evangelical Christian. Very few, there is a percentage of people who homeschool that are not evangelical Christians, but generally homeschoolers tend to be evangelical Christians who don't want their kids to learn about Darwinian evolution, especially now. They don't want them to get, LGBT and woke stuff in school. But the fact that the homeschooling mom, after spending the day teaching her kids, who she doesn't want to go to school because she wants them to get conservative, a more conservative evangelical upbringing, then has to go at night once dad gets home from work, right, at 5 or 6, then she has to go and wait tables at Denny's all night. That's not good. And Donald Trump is making it good. Well, she doesn't have to pay taxes on her tips anymore. Well, okay, but she shouldn't have to work, right? She's doing the full-time job of teaching her kids. And this is supposed to be the best economy we've ever had, and homeschool mom has to bust her ass every night at Denny's, waiting on people. That's crazy. That's absolutely crazy. That is absolutely crazy. The other thing I will say, I'll just throw this out there, right? I mean, I don't care about this. I'm not condemning anybody, obviously. You know what? You do know that a lot of tips are given in cash, and waiters don't declare them, right? I mean, that's why waiters like cash tips, right? As they what tip? They just shove the money in their pocket, right? If it's not in cash, if it's on the credit card, then it gets, remitted to them by their employer. And so then taxes come out of it. A lot of tips are already tax-free, right? It basically, this, saves a lot of paperwork, and stuff, right? Having to report your tips, and, a lot of waiters don't report tips. How are they going to prove that? I mean, it's cash, right? So I'm just throwing it out there. And I mean, nothing wrong with that. I'm not sitting here saying, oh, waiters are a bunch of tax fraud. No, I mean, that, they don't, I don't think they should have to pay taxes on their tips. I think it's great they don't, but a lot of them weren't anyway. And you all know that too, right? A lot of them weren't anyway. And now the forms they had to fill out, and the people whose job it was to look it over and say, I don't know if he's reporting all the tips he got. Well, now they're not doing that anymore. That's one thing. It's not, it is a victory, I think, but I mean, just throwing that out there. But we don't live in the strongest economy, the golden age of America, if homeschool mom has to wait tables all night. We just don't. And I've made that point. The Dell computer guy, right? That was just, I cannot make this point enough, right? Right? Why did Microsoft come into existence? Why did Apple come into existence? Why did IBM come into existence? Why, look up the history of Amazon. Wall Street didn't build Silicon Valley, right? Silicon Valley wasn't built by individual, ingenuity. And these guys were just so smart. It was a decision by the intelligence agencies. There would not have been a Silicon Valley if it wasn't for the American government. The American government made a strategic decision. The National Security Agency loaned them all the money. Al Gore, he got, they made fun of him during the, time when he was running for president in 2000, because he said, I invented the internet, or we invented the internet, is what he actually said. But it was true, right? In the 70s and 80s, the American government and the intelligence agencies and the Pentagon loaned a lot of money to a lot of people to make America the center of the computer revolution, because they knew it was one thing that the Soviet Union actually was doing very well in terms of, computer technology. They had their own home computer system in 1981. Look it up. They had designed a home computer system, but they didn't have the resources to mass produce it and distribute it to have it in every office. But the US government realized that they had a lot more money and resources than the Soviet Union did. And it was the NSA and the CIA and the Department of Defense that developed the computer revolution. That was not done by private individual people. It was done by a government decision. The US government, and you can even read, they decided they were going to do it in 1970. Zbigniew Brzezinski wrote a book called Between Two Ages, America Enters the Technotronic Era. And he basically said information technology is the future. The book by Brzezinski, who was the big Cold War strategist, who was the national security advisor to Jimmy Carter, who was given the Presidential Medal of Freedom by Ronald Reagan. He wrote this book in 1970, which I've read and I've quoted extensively. My book, Where is America Going?, quotes this book because it's really, really important. I have a book, Where is America Going? Marxism, MAGA, and the Coming Revolution. In that book, I quote Brzezinski, because Brzezinski wrote this very, very important book about the computer revolution. And it was before the computer revolution had even happened. Yeah, it's in this book, in chapter 1 of this book. And I Where is America Going? Marxism, MAGA, and the Coming Revolution. In chapter 1 of this book, I quote the book that Brzezinski, the Cold War strategist, wrote, where he said that the new left of the 1960s, it wasn't a communist revolution. It didn't represent the threat of communist revolution because there was no economic crisis and it wasn't among the population. It was just that social relations were changing because of information technology. People's relationship to religion, to authority, to tradition, to nationalism was changing because of information technology, TV being available, etc. And Brzezinski said that the new left didn't represent a threat of communist revolution. It just represented a change in the way human beings relate to each other because of information technology. And that rather than oppose the new left, we should use the new left and weaponize it against institutional Marxism. We should make the United States the center of information technology in order to, quote, Americanize the world. That is the strategy that Brzezinski laid out in his book. And in his book, America Enters the Technotronic Era, which I quote in this book extensively. It was a decision by the government to put the United States at the center of the computer revolution. And it was absolutely that. And, you know, the internet started with DARPA. And I mean, you go down the line, the government, the private sector did not create, you know, this idea that Dell, this guy, he just built some computers and he was a nerd and he sat in his dorm and he was just so creative. And it's like, no, the government, the state made a decision, which is what the state should do. I mean, they did it to oppose the Soviet Union, to advance American imperialism. But in theory, the state encouraging innovation and investing in technological advancement is a good thing, right? It's a good thing, but it was the state. And the idea that the free market created the computers revolution, that's not true. And like I said, the Soviet Union had their own home computer system. The Soviet Union invented space travel. LED lights were invented in the Soviet Union. The idea, oh, it's only the free market could ever invent computers. And that's, you know, this Dell guy, it was the free market bullshit. It was a government decision that created the computer revolution in America. The Soviet Union was having the same breakthroughs, and they made a geostrategic decision by Brzezinski, who led the Trilateral Commission along with Henry Kissinger. It's all well documented. The computer revolution was brought to you by the government and specifically by the intelligence apparatus and by the military. Okay. And, you know, free market apologetics. We've all been pumped full of this belief that the market is magical and solves all problems. That's bullshit, right? Free market economics is just wrong on many levels. So then we get to the part in the speech, and this is, again, there were many things tonight that were not, if you just read a transcript of the speech, you wouldn't see it. Trump dissed the Supreme Court royally. That was big. That was, I've never seen that, right? The Supreme Court, including a number of justices who Trump appointed, right? Justice Kavanaugh, right? Who they really tried to block Kavanaugh. They accused him of rape. They accused him of all these things. Justice Kavanaugh, who they just royally humiliated, but he got through. Justice Brett Kavanaugh, Justice Amy Coney Barrett, who is an outspoken neoconservative, is tied in with this People of Praise religious organization, is a Christian Zionist. Amy Coney Barrett. They were there. They ruled against Trump on the tariffs, and Trump dissed them in front of the whole world. Look at the looks on the faces of those Supreme Court justices. That was shit, man. Like, that was, whoo, yikes. I have never seen a president do that. We have never had a president who the Supreme Court rules against him, and at the State of the Union, in front of their faces, he dumps on them for a couple minutes. Yikes. That was, I don't think that looked good for Trump, and I think that was kind of a threat against the American political establishment. Look, as much as Trump has played ball with the American deep state, I mean, he's a Bonapartist. He wants to centralize power in his hands. He dissed the Supreme Court. They have never removed a Supreme Court justice. You can, right? They can be impeached, but I mean, the highest court in the land, the Supreme Court, and he dissed them in front of the whole world on global television. He called out the Supreme Court. That's, wow. Wow. Yeah, that was, what did I just watch? That was, I don't know if that was a wise move for Trump. I mean, it was pretty telling that they voted against him on the tariffs thing, and the justices he appointed voted against him. But the fact that he dissed him like that, that could come back to bite Trump in the ass. And again, you wouldn't know that if you just read the speech. You'd say, okay, but the way they were standing there, you know, I, that was big. That was, that was yikes, yikes. That was a bold move, but it was also a move that's not taken well. That's not taken well by anybody. And I think, there may be people in Trump's camp. There may be judges there are a lot of federal court judges that are Republicans and all of that. I feel like a lot of judges in general, not just Supreme Court, but a lot of federal judges may rule against Trump in response to this. There's something, judges are not supposed to be politicians. They are, right? We all talk about legislating from the bench and all of that, but judges are not supposed to be politicians. Judges are supposed to be kind of above politics. They're just enforcing the law, right? They're just enforcing the law. They're just, judges, you're not supposed to do that. You're really not supposed to do that. You're really not supposed to. And to have the president of the United States call out the Supreme Court and diss them in front of the whole world, that I feel like there's going to be a lot of people in the federal courts that will hold that against Trump. And when the Trump administration goes to federal court to fight for its positions, there's going to be a lot of judges who are like, oh, this guy thinks that if I rule against him, then he's going to, call me out on national TV. I feel like Trump lost a lot of points with the judicial sector, with the federal court system, with the Supreme Court. You just don't do that, right? I mean, and the Supreme, he's the president of the United States. The president of the United States has to go to the Supreme Court a lot. The Supreme Court is the one court that can overrule him, and don't make enemies out of the Supreme Court, Trump. Like, that was, okay, they dissed you on the tariffs, but maybe they'll agree with you on ICE or something like that. You didn't have to do that. Wow. I don't know if that was a smart move for Trump at all. It was certainly bold. I will say that. It was brave of him to do. But yikes, 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 yikes. He said something in his speech that I thought was amusing. Again, some of this stuff, you have to call it like conserva porn, where it's just like, this is not going to happen, right? It's like the fantasy of loads of conservatives, I'm sure. The idea that tariffs will replace all income tax. Really, right? No federal income tax. It'll just be tariffs on top products that are imported. You really believe that? They're going to repeal the 16th Amendment. Yes, in the early years of the country, in the time of Alexander Hamilton, that's what we had, right? There wasn't a federal income tax in America until like the 1920s and around the time of World War I. But you really think that we're going to get to the point that tariffs replace income tax? And I know that's a lot of libertarian conservatives like fantasy. Yes, I'll never have to pay income tax. Every cent that I earn, I'll get. And the way it'll be paid for is every foreign company that comes into the United States, they have to pay tariffs. Oh, that'll work. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Like, that is such a delusional right-wing fantasy. Like, no income tax, really. You see how much the American country is in debt right now? Do you see the level of national debt? And we're just going to stop having people pay income tax. We're just going to charge so much. And look at the impact of Trump's tariffs and how devastating that was, and how the Supreme Court's. So you're going to tell me we're going to raise the tariffs so high that they don't have to collect income tax revenue? Like, are you out of your mind? Like, that's just not going to happen. Right? I mean, maybe pigs will grow wings and fly, but I mean, that's ridiculous. But it's conservative porn, right? And that's the thing, is Trump is pandering to people who've digested Fox News their whole life and listened to Rush Limbaugh. In one of his State of the Unions, he actually gave the Medal of Freedom to Rush Limbaugh, right? This is, I don't even think Trump believes that. I don't think Trump is stupid enough to actually believe that, oh, yes, it's going to get to the point where we never collect income tax. never collect income tax, and it's all going to be tariffs. And it's like, you think we have trouble getting people to, you think the tariffs caused economic problems now? Imagine that they were so high that they made up for everyone else paying income tax, and we're already trillions of dollars in national debt. You know, when you pay your taxes, you do realize your taxes are not going to pay for stuff. They're paying back the banks that we borrowed from to pay for stuff. You do realize that it is, you know, basically your tax money goes directly into the hands of banks that are getting repaid for money they loaned to us. You know that. I mean, at this point, your tax money doesn't pay for stuff. Your tax money goes to pay back loans. So, I mean, yeah. But let's continue. All right. The Green New Scam. I'm with him on that. 100% with him on that, right? The Green New Deal is an absolute disaster. And look, there were some things Trump said that he's right about. Look, the Democrat Party has committed itself to degrowth, right? The Green New Deal is awful, right? Reduce the electrification of America, reduce fossil fuel consumption. You know, it's genocidal, right? You know, we're just going to shut down. We're going to shut down all the power plants. We're going to shut down all the nuclear facilities. We're going to shut down all the power plants. We're going to shut down all the coal plants, and we're going to have windmills and solar panels, and that'll be okay because we'll all just have electricity for an hour a day to save Mother Earth. You know, I mean, the Democrat Party has, you know, just committed to this degrowth agenda so much, and Trump, you know, he doesn't buy it, right? He wants corporations to make money. He wants the private sector, you know, capitalists. This whole speech was basically the lower levels of capital that are not part of the woke, you know, elite, the big monopolies, the Eastern establishment, you know, the Silicon Valley tech monopolies and the oil banking elite. Speech was largely aimed at lower levels. And that was actually one thing I wanted to comment on, which is that, you know, what did he do after he did the whole thing with the hockey players? He did a whole thing with the hockey players. And then after that, what did he do? He said, I got us the Summer Olympics and I got us the FIFA World Cup. And I mean, Donald Trump owns a bunch of hotels, and so do a lot of the people who voted for him, right? That's tourism money. But, you know, generally America didn't have to be the country that like begged and like fought to like, yes, can we please get the World Cup to come to our country? You know, like, you know, I mean, you know, and the fact that our economy is bad enough that Trump is, you know, going there and battling and engaging in a bidding war to make sure that we get the tourism money that comes from the World Cup, that we get the tourism money that comes from the Olympics. Not a good sign for America, but it's a good sign for the tourism sector. And in particular, one that he's heavily invested in, the hotel sector, right? You know, having the Olympics here, that brings in a lot of people, and a lot of people are staying at Trump hotels. That brings in a lot of people for the World Cup. I mean, it's, again, this is the lower levels of capital. I heard Trump urging the lower levels of capital to support him. He's lowering their taxes. He's, you know, et cetera. And the Green New Deal would be a disaster for the lower levels of capital, right? Imagine we didn't have the electricity. How are you going to run a small business if we didn't have the electricity? How are you going to run a small business if we, you know, I mean, he's saying, I want growth. I want economic growth. The ultra rich monopolies are saying they want degrowth, right? They want degrowth to stabilize the economy. Trump is saying, I want economic growth. The Green New Deal ain't going to bring economic growth. It was a degrowth agenda, energy scarcity, reducing consumption. Trump is against it. Right. Interesting. There was a dig at Mamdani, right? A couple digs at Mamdani. At one point, he called Mamdani the communist mayor, but he said, I like him. He's a great guy. Don't agree with his policies. That was interesting. There was another dig at Mamdani, which was affordability. I used the word affordability. And he said, now they've used that. Well, you know, that was Mamdani's campaign slogan, a city you can afford. So that was a dig at Mamdani also. And it's interesting. It's like he likes Mamdani because he sees Mamdani as at odds with the bulk of the Democratic Party, as kind of an up and coming. And that I think Trump is thinking long term, right? And I'll get to that later, but the only hope the Democrats have is they really have to deliver on some kind of social democratic agenda, but they just can't bring themselves to do it. So, but yeah, affordability. He said, I used the word affordability. Now the Democrats are using that word. Mamdani got elected as mayor of New York City on the, you know, I will make things affordable. And this was the part of the speech that, right, as he got into this part of the speech, And I mean, at one point he said rent is lower in America. I haven't noticed that. I mean, where is rent lower? Rent is not lower. Rent has been rising consistently. But the part of the speech that I thought was just brilliant was this next part. The Unaffordable Care Act. Boom. The Unaffordable Care Act, right? It's true. Obamacare made things worse. The only thing Obamacare did that was good is that now they can't deny you insurance for a pre-existing condition. Other than that, it made healthcare more expensive. The Affordable Care Act did the opposite of what it was supposed to be. And all the Republicans went out and said it was socialized medicine, that it was nationalization of the healthcare sector. It's not that at all, right? And yeah, it was an epic failure for the people it said it was going to help, right? It was supposed to address the issue that Americans pay a huge amount for health insurance, that health insurance companies routinely screw over American working people. That's what it was supposed to be, but it didn't do that. Affordable Care Act made things worse. He called it the Unaffordable Care Act. And I don't think he's wrong with that, right? One thing he said in his speech that I thought was odd is he said we're going to stop all payments to big insurance companies. What? I mean, it sounds great. We all hate, big healthcare companies, right? And that's part of the Luigi Mangione, worship and all of that. We all hate the heads of healthcare companies that get rich by denying people care. And, I mean, health insurance and healthcare is a ripoff in this country, and the costs are ridiculous. And it's a national embarrassment. But what are you going to do short of nationalizing or creating single payer, Medicare for all? What are you going to do? You're going to stop all payments to big insurance companies? How does that work? How does that work? He didn't explain that. I'm going to stop all payments. That sounds like Bernie Sanders, right? No more money will go to big healthcare. Well, how are people going to get healthcare then? If we still have private health insurance companies providing health insurance and paying for healthcare services, somebody's going to have to pay them. So either you nationalize them, or I don't even know what in the world is he talking about, right? He's going to stop all payments to big healthcare. That doesn't make any sense. And I noticed that RFK Jr., who's, Make America Healthy Again, he was there and he was not impressed. RFK was sitting there, not impressed. And that was interesting. That was very interesting. RFK did not look impressed. JD Vance was also kind of like, what the fuck is he talking about? You're going to stop all payments to big insurance. How do you stop all payments to big insurance companies? I think that they basically did polling, and they found out that when Bernie Sanders talks about healthcare companies ripping people off, a lot of the old people who would vote for Trump otherwise applaud. And so Trump said some Bernie Sanders type stuff that didn't even make any coherent sense, Stop all payments to big insurance companies. Oh, okay. That works, right? And he just said some Bernie Sanders-ish sounding stuff that doesn't even coherently make sense. So again, the older folks who vote, right? They heard that. I'm mad at my healthcare company. I got heard. Okay. That was completely incoherent stuff. The other thing, we have the lowest prices for prescription drugs anywhere in the world. What? Huh? Anywhere in the world? You're telling me that? Really? We have the lowest prices for prescription drugs in America than anywhere in the world. How does that work? So you go to third world countries and prescription drugs are more expensive than they are in America? Huh? What? How does that work? And again, there's just a lot of statistics he threw out tonight that just didn't make any sense. That just doesn't make any sense. The lowest prices for prescription drugs anywhere in the world in America? How does that? I mean, I'm not saying it's not true. It could be true. It just doesn't sound right to me. Right? Just like no illegals entering the country. How does he know that? No fentanyl ever smuggled into the country. How does he know that? Right? And now we have the lowest prescription drugs costs of any country in the entire world. I guess there's not a single place on this entire planet where people pay more for prescription drugs than in America. I find that really hard to believe. I have a feeling in Somalia, if I went to Somalia, there's probably somebody who sells prescription drugs for cheaper than America. If not, nobody in Somalia is ever going to get prescription drugs, which a lot of people in Somalia don't have them. But wow, that was the lowest prescription drugs anywhere in the world. What the hell is he talking about? Infertility. right? So the prescription drug person he helped was a mother, who, is a woman who was struggling to be fertile, for taking drugs for her infertility. That was cool. And that, again, there are good things about Trump. That's pronatal, right? He could have had somebody there with their asthma medication that got cheaper. He could have had someone there with their, but he was saying, I want the birth rate to go up. And that's really important, right? And again, Trump wants growth. That's the divide in our ruling class right now. The ultra rich and the monopolies and the British Empire and the Jeffrey Epstein people want degrowth. They want depopulation. Bill Gates wants depopulation. Epstein wanted depopulation. The British Empire, the British royal family wants depopulation. The World Business Forum wants depopulation. Trump wants to increase the population. And that comes through because he wants to make money. He wants economic growth. He's like Norman Vincent Peale, right? He's like, Paula White Cain. He just wants growth, abundance, and wealth, right? That's a good thing about Trump, right? Most of leftism has just become Malthusian, right? They want degrowth. Well, no, Trump wants growth. He just believes you get it with free market capitalism. And he wants to increase the population because if, there's more people, they can buy more products. They spend more money. I mean, Trump is pro-natal, and that's the division in the ruling class. Some people in our ruling class, I'd say the ultra-rich, want degrowth and depopulation to stabilize the economy. And Trump wants to increase the population. I do too. And so does Russian President Putin. And so does the government of China. And so does the government of North Korea. Kim Jong-un was crying on TV, urging North Korean mothers to have more children, right? We need more people. Overpopulation is a lie, and it is an evil lie. The problem is an irrational economic system. We need a rationally planned economy, but this planet has resources for everybody. There's plenty of resources, and we can use resources differently, right? We can go towards nuclear energy. We can go towards fusion energy, but there is no limit to human growth and creativity. And the idea of degrowth, depopulation, that is the old order, the old ruling elite trying to hold on to power. And Trump doesn't believe in that. He believes in Norman Vincent Peale, and his religious beliefs are there is no limit to growth and abundance. And, he mixes it in with a lot of libertarian free market delusions. He doesn't understand that capitalism and the market don't allow that, but that's a good thing about Trump. That's one thing I like about Trump. There are things about Trump that I do appreciate, right? And one of them is he believes in growth. And the other is that he pushes this kind of radical optimism. And the third thing is that he's trying. And that was the moment where, the Democratic Party, the reason Trump is doing okay right now, right? He's doing awful in the polls and the country is not getting any better, but he actually is trying. The Democrats are just the party of the corrupt apparatus, right? Minnesota, $90 billion stolen, basically, right? You look at that, right? And the Democratic Party, he was saying things that, Trump just pointed at the Democrats. He said, I will always protect Medicare and Social Security. They are not protecting it. He just raked the Democrats over the coals, showing that they don't actually believe in the issues that they claim to fight for, right? And when he just started, and at one point he said, they should stand up for this, protect American citizens, not illegal aliens. Well, it may not be politically correct. The overwhelming majority of Americans, if you ask them, who should the government protect? Should it protect the citizens or people that entered the country illegally? Of course, they're going to say, well, the government should protect the citizens. That's just kind of political common sense. In fact, the Democrats couldn't stand up for that and couldn't applaud for it. They were all sitting down for that. What the fuck? That was politically very, very stupid. Very, 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 very stupid on their part. Right. And the part he's talking about, no more mail-in ballots. Right. That was, again, like that part of the speech, when he hit them with the healthcare stuff, when he hit them with Medicare for all, I will always protect Medicare and Social Security, and they're not protecting. He's basically saying, I'm the Democrat. I'm a real Democrat, and you guys are just the machine. And he was saying things that Democrats are supposed to believe, like never touch Medicare, never touch Social Security, and they're all just sitting there, and he talked about the fraud, which is very, very real in Minnesota. Look, there's like, it's gotten to the point that the Democrats are mixed up in this kind of, Muslim mafia, that the CIA goes around the world bribing people with visas and bringing them into the United States, right? And they're not undocumented, they're legally in the country, but the number of people in Minnesota, there's like a whole section of Minnesota that they've created, little Mogadishu and all of that. Like the Democrats are tied in with some deep state, CIA intelligence stuff, bringing in Muslims from around the world, and it's not benefiting the American working people. And Trump doesn't agree with it, probably because the people they're bringing in are anti-Israel. They'll serve U.S. foreign policy in places like Syria and Libya, maybe against Iran. They tend to be Sunnis, Muslim Brotherhood aligned, but they're not. They're anti-Iran. They're pro-imperialist Muslims that they bring in, and it's some kind of CIA thing. And Trump is against it, for whatever reason. And the Democrats are just loyal to this Muslim mafia, basically. This, corrupt, nepotistic. You do the dirty work of America. You kill 7 Shia or whatever, and then we give your family a visa, and you get to come to Minnesota and open up a child care clinic that's actually not a child care clinic. We just give you a big check, and then you send it back to Somalia to some fighting group that assassinates people we don't like. I mean, the Democrats are involved in some shady deep state intelligence stuff that is related to international operations. And most Americans aren't benefiting from it. The Democrats are loyal to a globalist internationalist system, but they talk nicer, but they're more ruthless. And they also feel entitled. They just represent that globalist machine. They represent that World Business Forum, Bill Gates, George Soros, globalist machine, and they feel that they don't have to try in elections. They don't have to try. And, they're entitled to win. And if you disagree with them, that's because you're racist. You're just a big deplorable. And Trump actually tries, right? And again, he was saying things that you would think would just get applause in any other country. If the president got up and said, it's my job, I think the government should protect the citizens of the country, not people who've entered this country illegally. Any country in the world, people would say, of course, that's the president's job. But Trump said that, and half the room couldn't stand up and applaud for him. Why couldn't they stand up for that? Because they'd be canceled, right? Because it's bizarre. Most Democrats agree with that statement. And he said that. Trump said that. Most Democrats, if you ask them, so should the government protect the citizens or people that have entered the country illegally? Most Democrats are going to say, well, obviously we should protect all human life. But yes, if it's a choice, we give priority to the citizens of the country. But any Democrat that had stood up would have been canceled, right? All the woke people would have, and that's wokeism has its grip over the Democratic Party. And you'll notice all of them stood up. All the Democrats stood up for the anti-Iran stuff. That's fine, right? The woke cancel machine doesn't cancel you for wanting a war with Iran. When Trump was lying through his teeth about Iran, which we'll get to in a minute, all the Democrats are applauding for that. You don't get canceled for that, right? That's fine. But if you don't agree with the Muslim mafia that the Democrats are bringing into this country as part of their international operations, right? If you don't agree with, you can't agree with Trump on the economy. You can't agree with Trump on crime. You can't agree with Trump on national security. But when it comes to war with Iran, oh yeah, all those Democrats were standing up. Fuck you, Democrats. They are the best. I mean, and that's the thing. There would be no Trump. If the Democratic Party had any principles or any sincerity, if they were a party that could have allowed Bernie Sanders to win, there would be no Trump. But the Democrats are so corrupt and so dishonest and so phony and so fraudulent. They don't give a shit about the people they pretend to represent. They don't care about working people. They don't care about black people. They don't care about immigrants. They don't care about women. They definitely don't care about peace. They're war hawks. Obama deported more people, than you. They don't give a shit about any of the people they talk about. They love to play violins. Oh, Trump is racist. Trump is awful. They don't give a shit about any of the people they represent. They are just the corrupt political machines. And I've said for a long time that both major parties in America have their weaknesses. And that the weakness of the Republicans is often they're fanatical in a way that alienates a lot of people. And that has been their issue going back to Lincoln, right? The radical Republicans, Thaddeus Stevens, their politics were significantly back then to the left of most Americans. In the 1950s, right, they became to the right, right? You had the weakness of the Republicans was the John Birch Society, was Joe McCarthy. The Republicans were seen as fanatical right wingers and all of that. That's always been the Republicans' weakness, is they're seen as too fanatical. The Democrats' weakness is they're the party of the urban political machines, and they're corrupt, and nobody believes them. On paper, most Americans agree with the Democratic Party. If you ask them on the issues where they stand, on most issues, Americans are Democrats. But people don't believe the Democrats. The Democrats lie. Obama came into office on a white horse, like he was going to save the day. I am the savior. He was like, and the way the Democrats whipped up like this worship cult of personality around Obama. If you are too young to remember, you're lucky. I remember 2008. It was scary. People were like in a trance. Obama could do no wrong. If you dissed Obama, people wanted to fight you on the street. It was weird. It was creepy. It was scary. You were not allowed to disagree with Obama. People had this emotional, like they cried when he spoke, when he took the oath, they were crying. Oh my God, he's just so amazing. And then Obama was president for 8 years, and we got more wars, and things got worse in terms of race relations, more police brutality, and our civil liberties continued, and Guantanamo Bay never closed, and healthcare got worse, and everything got worse. And Biden did the same shit. Biden's State of the Union, or the speech Biden gave when he first took office, was pretty good. He just didn't do any of it. Biden's presidency the 4 years of Biden were awful. The Democrats are liars. They are liars, and they are so, they would say that, like, if a politician was like to the point that he couldn't do what he wanted to do because he was so controlled by organized crime, they'd say he was mobbed up. The Democrats are mobbed up, right? I mean, it's the healthcare mafia, it's the finance mafia, it's the U.S. intelligence mafia. The Democrats are so mobbed up, they can't do what they want to do, right? The Democratic Party is the property of the organized criminal cartel that runs this country, right? They are the property of the CIA. They are the property of the big healthcare companies. They are the property of the insurance cartels and then the oil companies. They are the property of the Rockefellers and the DuPonts and the World Business Forum. And the Democrats are so mobbed up, they can't help themselves. They're not, Trump can get up there and be Trump, right? And talk about his dad and, talk about immigration. And, Trump is being Trump. I think Trump does hate immigrants. I think Trump hates immigrants. I think he's very honest about that. I don't think it's a show. I think Trump honestly believes immigrants are criminals and dirty people. Trump's a rich kid from New York, and I think he hates immigrants. And Trump can get up there and hate immigrants because that's who he is. Democrats can't be themselves, right? They've got mob bosses, mafia bosses sitting back there like this going, you better do what we tell you. And that's why they all stood up for war against Iran. Oh, yeah, we want to bomb Iran. But when Trump said maybe the government should think about the citizens and not people in the country illegally, they all sat there. And when Trump said, I reject political violence of any kind, they all sat there. I mean, it's just, unbelievable, right? It's just unbelievable. There was a moment where he said, he talked about the guy who survived. He was going to die, but the mother told me he's going to make it. And she turned out to be right. Again, that's Donald Trump's religious beliefs. Prosperity gospel, the power of belief, Norman Vincent Peale, the power of positive thinking, that just comes through. Donald Trump's religious beliefs, which are the beliefs of the lower levels of capital, right? That came through. Marco Rubio. So towards the end of the speech, there was a whole bunch of Trump just kissing up to the military. Just kissing up to the military like you wouldn't believe. And at one point, he was just sucking Marco Rubio's dick. I mean, he was just, oh, Marco Rubio is so amazing. But did you look at Marco Rubio's face? It was just kind of like, yeah, buddy. Yeah, keep it coming, asshole. Marco Rubio wasn't appreciating Trump's praise. You'd think he's on national television. The president of the United States is just going, you're amazing. You're so awesome, Marco. And Marco's like, Yeah, that tells me something's going on. And there's all these rumors about the fact that it looks like the USA may not attack Iran. Thank God. And it's because military people won't go along with it. Marco Rubio wants to attack Iran, and it looks like Trump ain't going to do it. And JD Vance is against it, and Tulsi Gabbard is against it. And Trump is scared of the military right now. He's scared of Marco Rubio, and he's scared of the military. And the end of the speech, there was just this endless, he was given an award to another military person and another military person. Trump needs the military to support him. And he's afraid that people like Marco Rubio, the neocons, are going to turn against him. He's scared. Trump is afraid of the military, and he's afraid of the neocons. That's what I saw tonight. He's afraid of the military, and he's afraid of the neocons. And he was bowing before Marco Rubio. Please like me. And Marco Rubio was like, I don't know. You know, I mean, he's getting praised on national TV, and Marco Rubio, nah. And the military, again, you know, he was pinning. How many medals was he handing out? You know, my wife said it was like an award show. It was like the Oscars. How many more medals? You know, how many more medals is he handing out? He's begging the military, don't turn against me. Please don't turn against me. That was very scary. Very, very scary indeed. But it does make me believe he probably won't attack Iran. Now, when he started talking about Iran, he lied. He said so many false things. And the foreign policy stuff was absolutely abominable. It was abominable. First of all, I mean, well, did you notice the Russia stuff was super vague? He just said, you know, there's the 9th war, Russia and Ukraine. I would really like to end it. And that was it. I mean, it was like, but we're moving on from that, right? He didn't say anything about Russia, basically. Nothing, right? But when it came to Iran, he said that he obliterated Iran's nuclear weapons program. Iran has never had a nuclear weapons program. They are signatories of the Iran, of the non-proliferation treaty. There's never been an Iranian nuclear weapons program. So he obliterated part of their peaceful nuclear energy program, which they have the right to do. He obliterated a site that's monitored 24 hours a day by the International Atomic Energy Agency. Iran has never had a nuclear weapons program. So you obliterated something that doesn't exist. He says Iran in the negotiations has never said to us, gotta love this, has never said to us the secret words, we will never get a nuclear weapon. Iran has said we will never get a nuclear weapon for the past 47 years. Right? Khomeini, the founder of the Islamic Republic, said neither east nor west, and that Iran will never align with any nuclear power and will never have nuclear weapons. They say that nuclear weapons go against the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad. I don't know how that worked. There weren't nuclear weapons back then. They say that it is against Islam to have nuclear weapons. Iran has said over and over and over again they don't want nuclear weapons. And he's saying, well, Iran just won't say they don't want nuclear weapons. Iran has said that. They've bent over backwards saying that. They signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. They have the IAEA monitoring all their peaceful nuclear energy sites. They gave up almost all of their peaceful nuclear energy program in 2015 as part of the Iran nuclear deal. And what more do they have to do? They're not trying to get nuclear weapons. You're just lying. Iran has never once violated the nuclear non-proliferation treaty. Never once, right? Iran has never once moved in any way that would be considered nuclear proliferation under the treaty. They gave up almost all their peaceful nuclear energy in 2015 as a deal with Obama, and they still got Qasem Soleimani, their top general, murdered. Like the whole conversation is premised on a lie, okay? And the other thing he said Iran loved roadside bombs. Most of the roadside bombs in Iraq were planted by Sunnis, right? Iran sponsored the Shia militias. Iraq, is about 60% Shia, about 40% Sunni. And it was the Sunnis, the Wahhabis, that were the ones that were, setting up roadside bombs, IEDs, killing U.S. troops. Actually, especially in the early years when the fighting was the most intense, the Shia militias that were sponsored by Iran, they tended to cooperate with the United States. They were trying to defend themselves against Wahhabi extremists who wanted to kill Shia Muslims. That's just not true, right? The idea that Iran was killing U.S. troops, I mean, it was largely Saudi-funded Wahhabi extremists and former Baathists who eventually went on to form the ISIS, right? ISIS was former Baathist generals, former Saddam Hussein Baath people who were Sunni and hated Shia and hated Iran. They're largely the folks that were doing that. That was not the U.S. troops that were killed in Iraq were not killed by Shia Muslims backed by Iran. They just weren't. And that's just not factually accurate. And again, if you know anything about the region, Iran wanted a stable Iraq because it's right on their border. And they immediately, the first president of Iraq after the USA invaded was a Shia Muslim. Shia are friendly to Iran. Iran is Shia. Like, they don't know what they're talking about, right? And it's infuriating. And then he gets to the thing about, Iran has missiles that threaten Europe. And Iran might develop missiles that could threaten America. Right? This is an important meme. Right? And I think, this is how many U.S. military bases there are surrounding Iran. Right? I'm just going to put this on the screen. So Iran is supposedly threatening Europe, right? It's Iran is the big threat. Look at this map, right? Right? So this is Iran, right? This is the Islamic Republic of Iran. And this is all, and you can see all the U.S. military personnel around Iran. So, right. So we're told that Iran is developing missiles that could potentially hit Europe. Meanwhile, there are U.S. military bases encircling Iran. All of those military bases can shoot missiles into Iran. All of those military bases can oversee strikes on Iran. But we're told Iran is threatening Europe. And Iran doesn't even have missiles that could hit America. But they're the one we should be afraid of? Like, I mean, who's violating whose sovereignty? Who's threatening who? Look at this map. Right? How many Iranian military bases are there surrounding America? 0. Right? And I mean, this U.S. military bases are surrounding Iran, but Iran developing missiles that could potentially reach Europe and not having missiles that could reach America. They're the aggressors, clearly. This is so ridiculous. So ridiculous. Utterly ridiculous. Utterly ridiculous. But you notice it was totally fine for the Democrats to stand up for this part. Oh, yeah, no one's going to cancel any Democrats for standing up for this, right? Ilhan Omar wasn't shouting at him about this. No, the Democrats all just, applauded for this. So despicable. Wokeism is evil. It really is evil. Wokeism doesn't want to stop World War III. Wokeism doesn't want to raise living standards. Wokeism doesn't want to protect civil liberties. You notice there were people, there was one guy, I think it was Alan Green, the congressman. He had a sign protesting Trump. And what did his sign say? Trump is violating our civil liberties with ICE. Nope. What did his sign say? Did it say Trump is threatening to bring us into a new war with Iran? Nope. What did the sign, the Democrat who brought a sign, what did it say? It said, black people are not apes, that Trump put something nasty on his Twitter account. That's what you're allowed to be concerned about. You're a Democrat now. The problem with Trump is that he says nasty words, right? It's not that we could have a new war with Iran. It's not that he kidnapped Nicolas Maduro. It's not that he's, working families, living standards are going down, and homeschool mom has to work at wait tables all night just to pay for the kids. No. You're supposed to be mad that Donald Trump said a naughty word. He put a nasty racist thing on the internet. This is wokeism. This is why it's toxic. And that's why you cannot work with these people. Right. And I'm going to try not to get too fired up on here, but it's like, again, I'm disappointed by Trump. He looked great tonight. He looked absolutely great tonight because the Democratic Party is so mobbed up that they can't do anything genuine. Donald Trump is Donald Trump. He believes what he says. He hates immigrants. He wants lots of money. He wants corporations to make lots of money and not have to pay income taxes. Donald Trump is closer to being sincere, than any Democrat can be. And what he's sincere about, I don't agree with. I don't hate immigrants. I don't think the immigration crackdown is going to benefit working families in any way. But that said, Trump believes it does. And Trump also believes corporations making profits is going to be good. And no Democrat can fight for anything that matters. All they can do is point fingers at Trump. Dictator, racist, Nazi. and then on all the stuff that, like new wars that shouldn't be happening, like, like our civil liberties being taken away and people being deported because they stand for Palestine and, and all that stuff, the Democrats just shut their mouths, um, and he's talking about a new beginning for Venezuela. So I wanted to show on here Dulce Rodriguez, who is the interim president of Venezuela, but she doesn't consider herself to be the president of Venezuela, right? Maduro is the president, but he's been kidnapped, right? Dulce Rodriguez, she met with the CIA, and there is like an arrangement where Venezuela is giving oil to the United States, and Venezuela has been blocked from giving oil to to Cuba, and a lot is going on. But this is a recent statement from Dulce Rodriguez, right? They really are trying to get this narrative out there that oh well, Venezuela, there's been a whole regime change. I don't buy that. I think Venezuela is backed into a corner, and I think the United States needs their oil. That was one thing. Trump was talking about low energy prices. Imagine if they didn't, Trump's blocking oil from the markets. That's going to make the price of oil go up. I mean, Trump is playing games with the price of oil. But yeah, let's put the video of Dulce Rodriguez on here. And this is a statement she made because, yeah, she had to meet with the CIA, and it looks like diplomatic relations with the actual Venezuelan government are going to be restored. And it's a complicated situation. But this is Vice President Dulce Rodriguez, a longtime political friend of Maduro. This is what she said about meeting with the CIA. So let me just put this on for you because it's an important clip, right? This is Dulce Rodriguez.
También debo decir, tengo conocimiento de algunos sectores que no están dando lectura correcta a lo que está ocurriendo en el país, que lo están midiendo, Indira, desde una derrota político-partidista. El 3 de enero perdió Venezuela. El 3 de enero perdimos todos los venezolanos y perdimos todas las venezolanas. Todos perdimos. No hubo ganador en este país. Y yo estoy viendo que hay sectores dando lectura incorrecta de la ley de amnistía y del proceso de convivencia. Ya tienen planes. Y en su debida oportunidad los voy a mostrar al país para que se sepa quiénes, desde un lujoso hotel en los Estados Unidos o en Europa, pretenden descarrilar este proceso. Pretenden perturbar el camino de la tranquilidad y la paz en Venezuela. Y que sea el pueblo venezolano quien juzgue, que sea el pueblo venezolano quien diga lo que tenemos que hacer. Porque ya basta. Y ahí sí yo digo, no repetición. Y ahí sí yo llamo a una justicia genuina y verdadera, porque ya basta, ya basta. Este proceso que estamos construyendo todos y todas, hay que cuidarlo. Y por eso yo les agradezco que se incorporen y que estemos sumados. Y yo sé, señora Zoraida, yo sé lo difícil. A mí me ha tocado cara a cara, se los tengo que decir, sentarme con los verdugos de mi padre. Y lo he hecho por Venezuela.
Yeah, there hasn't been a counter-revolution in Venezuela. If there is one, we'll know. But right now, the Venezuelan state, they've had their leader kidnapped. They've had the United States surround them militarily and put pressure on them. But there hasn't been a counter-revolution, and Marco Rubio is angry about that. He wants a counter-revolution, but Trump says we need their oil and we need the energy markets to, we need cheap gasoline. He was bragging about the cost of gas being cheap, and if you blow Venezuela off the market, you'd have very high gas prices. And Marco Rubio wants an attack on Iran. I don't think it's going to happen. I think Trump is beating his chest, but I think, I don't think Trump actually wants to attack Iran. And the look on the way Trump was sucking up to the military, the way Trump was kissing Marco Rubio's ass and Marco Rubio didn't seem to appreciate it, I don't think we're going to attack Iran. I really hope that they don't attack Iran. And we've signed a letter as the Center for Political Innovation saying that they should not attack Iran. And also the way the Russia thing, he said we'd like to end that war and he just moved on really quickly, right? There was no grandstanding, nothing. Maybe we could actually get a peace deal. I don't know what's going to happen. And again, the speech towards the end of it, it was just him sucking up to the military ridiculously, giving out another medal and another medal. And some of it he pulled from Obama, right? He was telling the big epic story about the kidnapping of Maduro and then the helicopter and the blood pouring down his back. And who knows if any of that's true? That's all scripted, and Obama did that with the raid on the home of Osama bin Laden, right? And a lot of that ended up to be fiction, right? That we were told that Obama had this big epic story about the Navy SEALs that went and killed bin Laden, and that turned out to a lot of that wasn't true, and or is disputed at the very least. And and then he talked about the American Revolution is continuing. That's a Marxist thing. American discourse speaks of a revolution as being an event, right? But the idea our revolution is continuing, that's a rhetorical device he pulled from Marxists, right? So I thought that was amusing as well. But largely, this speech was a win. This speech was a win for Trump. It was a win for Trump. It was well delivered. And again, I don't think it would be a win for Trump if he had real opposition, but he doesn't. The Democratic Party is a slave to its own. The Democratic Party is just the activist wing of globalism and wokeism. It is the elected wing of globalism and wokeism. And Trump represents, a section that is more tied in with hotel chain owners and, restaurant chain owners and lower level capitalists, and is trying to appease their desire for growth and isn't as invested in the globalist, degrowth, stabilized capitalism, own nothing and be happy about it agenda. And, we'll see. The foreign policy stuff on Iran was just full of lies. Iran's IED stuff, that's a huge stretch. Iran is not trying to get a nuclear bomb so they can kill us. Again, look at this map, right? Who is the aggressor? I think we know who the aggressor is. It ain't Iran. Iran is just threatening America. Look at they put their country right next to all our military bases. It's just so ridiculous. But we'll see. But the left is so pathetic and the left is so bad. The Democrats are so bad. Look, Tucker Carlson went to the White House today and apparently made one effort to try and prevent an attack on Iran. Good for Tucker. Tucker Carlson stood up for the Uhuru movement, right? Tucker Carlson has interviewed Russian President Putin, and Marjorie Taylor Greene, she's out of Congress. She stepped down, but she comes out of the Trump camp. Thomas Massey. There's a lot of people in the MAGA camp that are not just going to applaud for Trump when he does what they disagree with and don't want these wars and don't want the attacks on civil liberties. And, Marjorie Taylor Greene even spoke up about the ICE killing and said that the ICE killing. Dissident MAGA is the most important constituency in America right now, right? And with everything going on with Epstein, the MAGA camp has a lot of people in it that see Trump hasn't delivered on what he's promised. They don't support ICE killing people. They don't support a new war against Iran. They don't think kidnapping Maduro is good for America. Right? There are dissident MAGA out there. And I think that's where the hope is, because, if I've learned anything in the last 10 or 12 years, it's that you're not allowed to be sincere and be on the left, right? If you're sincere, right, the left will stab you in the back, right? The left doesn't want to end the wars. The left doesn't want to fight for working class people and their economic system. All the left wants to do is impose economic degrowth and call you racist and cancel you and smear your reputation if you disagree. Based on that, dissident MAGA that wants a strong America where the economy is better, that wants to end these wars around the world, that doesn't buy into the degrowth, we've all got to be poorer and drive down the population agenda. That's where the hope is. So that's my analysis of Trump's speech. So, I'm glad everyone's watching. I would like to answer a few questions. So if you can send me a few questions via Buy Me a Coffee. I saw someone Cash Apped me, which I appreciate. And if Yogi Fish, if you'd like to send your question, if you want to put your question in the chat, if you want to expound on it further, Yogi Fish cash apped me a question. But the best way to send a question is to go to Buy Me a Coffee. Buy Me a Coffee is the best way to send your question. And I would like to answer a few questions. So I need a couple people to buy me a coffee. If anyone can, go to buymeacoffee.com/Caleb Maupin and send some questions, that'd be great. Why don't we do a quick roll call? So I'll call you all out as I see you. Names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who is with us? Names and locations. And then after, Ilya from St. Petersburg. Good to see you, Ilya. Names and locations. Who is with us? Names and locations. Who is with us? Rice from Adelaide, Australia. Good to see you, Rice. Good to see you. Bendigo, Australia, David Fox. Good to see you. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Viceroy from Chicago, John in Florida, Ryan in Kansas City, Jeffrey in San Francisco, Anthony in Detroit, Chris in Salt Lake City. Good to see you. Yogi Fish from Union City, New Jersey, Sydney in Australia, Al in Sydney, Australia. Good to see you. Well, good to see you. Good to have you with us tonight. Good to have you, right? Anybody else? Names and locations. Brian in Dayton, Ohio. Diana in Florida. Good to see you. Names and locations. Anybody else? Names and locations. Ontario, Canada. Derry, Ireland. All right. Michael McGoldrick. Jerry in Grand Rapids. Good to see you, Jerry. Penny in Minnesota. Good to see you, Penny. Good to see you. All right. Anybody else? Names and locations. If not, I want to start answering people's questions. California, from California. Well, there you go. Linda from Scottsdale, Arizona. Good to see you. But yeah, if people want to send questions, buymeacoffee.com is the best way to send your questions. I'll be on here a little while to keep answering questions. Al in New York City, Beyond Narratives. Good to see you. Good to have you. All right. Anybody else? And yeah, send some questions in for me. Patch in Arizona. Yeah, we got a good crowd of people here. It was a good 200 people watching at one point tonight. I will say there's been some State of the Union speeches that Trump gives that I just have nothing to say afterwards. This one, though, I had a lot to say. I think we went for a good hour and 40 minutes. I took a lot of notes and there was a lot to react to. And that, I've studied Trump and I've met Trump, right? I'm his favorite reporter, right? I asked him a question once at a press conference about Russia and he called on me. He said, all right, who's my favorite reporter? You. He pointed to me. So I guess I have insight. I've actually met President Trump and asked him a question one time in 2016 about Russia. So, maybe that gives me some insights, but I've studied, him and his personality. And I've also observed his administration. And, I thought he was the lesser of two evils in the recent election. And I don't regret that decision. I'm disappointed that he didn't mean what he said. But at the same time, if Kamala had gotten elected, and let me just get this out of the way, right? While I'm waiting for people to send in their questions, let's just be clear about this, right? In the 2024 election, the one candidate, Trump, said, I will end the wars. The other candidate, Kamala Harris, said, I will keep the war in Ukraine going until Ukraine wins, which is never going to happen, right? Because Crimea is Russia. The Donbass has voted to become part of Russia. No, she's going to keep it going forever. One candidate, Trump, said, I'm going to protect free speech. Kamala Harris said, and her vice presidential candidate, Tim Walz, the corrupt governor of Minnesota, said that he wants laws to ban disinformation. Trump, even though he's been quite anti-Islamic, he had events with Shia Muslims from Detroit who came onto the stage with him and all of that. Wow. Kamala Harris wouldn't allow a single Arab speaker or Muslim or Palestinian speaker on the stage at the Democratic National Convention. Kamala Harris is literally married to an AIPAC lobbyist. So if Kamala Harris had won the election, the American people would have voted for continuing the war in Ukraine forever and not negotiating with Russia. They would have voted for cracking down on speech that's considered disinformation and silencing dissident voices. And they would have been voting for, AIPAC to, live in the White House. Now, Trump got into office saying that he was going to end the wars, and he didn't do it. And he attacked Iran, and he kidnapped Maduro, and He hasn't ended the war in Ukraine, but he said he would. Trump came into office and he deported people for their views about Palestine. Not good. But he said he was going to protect free speech. Trump came into office, right? And he has blindly supported Israel. He said America first. And a lot of people in his camp, like Tucker Carlson and Marjorie Taylor Greene and others who campaigned for him, that were notoriously critical of Israel, Candace Owens and others. So it's a complicated situation. But if Kamala Harris had won, it would have given an electoral mandate. They would have been able to say, well, the American people voted for all the bad things. Trump getting in and not doing all the good things he said he was going to do and doing the opposite of what he said is still better, because it shows that the American people oppose these continued wars, that the American people oppose involvement in Israel. The American people oppose crackdowns on free speech. Trump hasn't done what he said he was going to do, but it would have been a lot worse if people had voted in favor of the opposite. And that's a defensible position. That's all I've ever said, right? That is all I've ever said. And, and if you're so, and let's just be honest, okay? And I'll get this out of the way too, as I wait for more questions to come in. Buymeacoffee.com is the best way to send a question. Let's just be honest about this. The Stop Trump movement doesn't come from a good place. You'll notice there was a Stop Trump protest inside of the halls of Congress. And what did the sign say? Did it say Trump is threatening a new war against Iran? No. Did it say Donald Trump has violated the free speech rights of pro-Palestine students? No. Did it say Donald Trump has violated the sovereignty of Venezuela, kidnapping their elected leader? No. Did it say Donald Trump is cutting the public sector and, taking good paying jobs? No. It said Donald Trump posted something racist, and I mean, he did, right? And it's indefensible. It's despicable what Trump, posted. I mean, and he says he didn't post it or whatever, but the Stop Trump movement, they're mad at Trump for negotiating with Russia. They want the war in Ukraine to go on forever. They're mad at Trump for being a Bonapartist. They're mad at Trump for believing in growth and not believing in their global lockdown to stabilize capitalism, their fascist degrowth policies. Stop Trump is coming from a bad place. And you can pretend it's not. And you can try to say, well, I'm against Trump because of all the bad things he's doing. That's great. But the people running No Kings are not against Trump for all the bad things he's doing. They're against Trump because they see him as a potential Bonapartist leader who could potentially do good things. They see him as a freewheeler that they can't control. They see him as not on their hate Russia bandwagon. They see him as believing in economic growth and not degrowth. And that's why they're against him. And you can pretend that, well, my Stop Trump is from a different place. Shama Sawant does this, the Trotskyite. She does this. Oh, I'm against Trump because of, you can say that, right? But it's like, say that, the Ku Klux Klan is having a rally, right? Well, they're having a rally against, some elected official because he's black. Well, you can show up and say, well, I'm not against him because he's black. I'm against him because he cheated on his taxes. Well, yeah, but you're surrounded by guys in sheets and they're burning crosses. And you can say, well, I disagree with the guy because he cheated on his taxes. I'm not racist, but you're part of a racist mob. And that's what Stop Trump is. You can say you're against Trump for all the bad things he's doing, right? And I am against Trump for all the bad things he's doing. He's a war criminal regarding Iran. He's criminal for his complicity in the genocide of the Palestinians. Trump is awful in a lot of ways. But if you join No Kings and you join the Stop Trump hysteria, refuse fascism, all of that, you're joining a mob that is against Trump for bad reasons. And you can pretend otherwise, but, we have to be real. Stop Trump is coming from a bad place. The only sector of the U.S. political, spectrum where there's any hope right now is dissident MAGA, right? I spent my life in communist groups. Right now, the communist groups are all part of wokeism, right? They're all joining the establishment's anti-Trump mobs, and they're all begging to be part of, whether it's Refuse Fascism or the RCP, whether it's Shama Sawant and her Workers Strike Back, which is, trying to build up the labor union bureaucracy to be part of this. No matter what it is, all the left are just part of the establishment's efforts to degrow the economy and control Trump and defeat Trump in order to have, the rule of the corrupt globalist mafia. Whereas, Trump has betrayed the people who voted for him, but Trump, whether it's Marjorie Taylor Greene, Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, there's a layer of people in the Trump camp, Thomas Massie and others, who are mad at Trump and want genuine anti-war, anti-globalist, pro-growth policies. And that's where the hope is. And those people are going to have to realize that you're not going to get that with the free market capitalist system. What we need is a government of action that fights for working families. We need a government that builds power plants. We need a government that, mobilizes 5-year economic plans and beats back the power of the big banks and monopolies in order to do it. We need a government of action that'll fight for working families, that'll break the power of the Rockefellers and the DuPonts and Wall Street. We need a government that builds, right? We need an anti-monopoly government, a pro-humanity, pro-growth government. That's what we need. And you ain't going to get that from the left, and you're not going to get it from Trump. But the people that are calling themselves dissident MAGA, right? The people that are in the MAGA camp, that are anti-Israel, that are anti-war, those people, they are going to have to realize that eventually that's what they're going to need. And it's not an easy thing, but I've been saying out of the movement to the masses. The movement, anything left in America is a dead end. And most of the established right is a dead end. But the American people are waking up in their millions, and we need to build a real anti-imperialist movement in communities among the American people. And that's what my organization, the Center for Political Innovation, is all about, right? You can visit our website, cpiusa.org, right? The Center for Political Innovation. You can join. We're building a movement that is against this globalist imperialist system and fighting for working families. Join the Center for Political Innovation. We're having a national day of action on Saturday. We're going to have people, it looks like 9 different cities. We're going to have no war against Iran protests coming up. That's pretty exciting. We're not a huge group. We don't have that many members, but it looks like we're going to have people in Chicago, in Minneapolis, in New York City, in South Carolina, in Iowa, or the Quad City area, Illinois, Iowa. It looks like we're going to have people in Colorado. Looks like we're going to be definitely going to have people in Los Angeles. We got a great group of people in Los Angeles. We're building a real anti-imperialist movement, and we're going to be setting up. Our goal is to set up community centers, where we provide services to people, but also educate them about anti-imperialism and have regular classes and lectures and outreach. We're building a real anti-imperialist movement, and that's the only thing that's going to make a difference is a real anti-imperialist movement. And dissident MAGA are the kind of people that could eventually join such a movement, and that needs to be the target for recruitment. Right? The left is dead and captured, and most of the right is captured, but there's a layer of people on the right, or a layer of people who identified with the goals of MAGA, but feel Trump has betrayed them, that don't want a new war against Iran, that don't support Israel, that want an economy that fights for working people, that aren't concerned about the free market principles. They just want life to get better for working people and working families. That's where the hope is for America. And that's our movement, the Center for Political Innovation. That's what we're fighting for. So I hope you'll get involved with CPI. We're going to be having workshops around the country. Our national convention is going to be coming up August 15th in Chicago area. A lot more coming up on that. But yeah, so is anyone, so we've got a couple questions that have come in. Do you think the Epstein issue will eventually become a serious scandal in the USA like it has been in the UK? That's Viceroy Xerxes asks that. Well, it is a serious scandal. The question is, will the media is very much trying to get back to normal and just say, nothing to see here, folks, move on. And the question is, how, will public opinion and other things be able to make it a more serious issue that's taken seriously? I mean, Prince Andrew was arrested, held for 11 hours and all of that. I mean, the media is trying to just get back to normal politics as if it didn't happen. Whereas the American people are horrified and want answers. And it reveals, I talked about our political class being mobbed up. I mean, that's human trafficking. That's, organized crime on a scale that is sickening, and you read what's in those emails about depopulation, about how they view, human beings, and, and I mean, it's pretty evil shit. And, you can gloss over it all you want, but it looks like there's a section of the government that wants to use this to oust Trump, which, I mean, I'm not saying Trump is blameless. It very well could be that Trump was very heavily involved in that stuff. I don't know. I just don't know Trump. I don't know the details. I've seen reports from NPR and other things. I don't know what's true about Trump in it. I know Trump knew Epstein. He certainly knew him. And it's annoying. Again, these fake Stop Trump people would have told you that Jeffrey Epstein didn't exist 3 months ago maybe 3 years ago. If you'd have mentioned Jeffrey Epstein, they would have gone, "Oh, Jeffrey Epstein. I bet you heard that on RT. I bet you watched that on InfoWars. Yeah, some wealthy Jewish guy had an airplane full of prostitutes. That sounds like a crazy conspiracy theory. That's made up. You're anti-Semitic. You must be a white nationalist. There's no such thing as a Jeffrey Epstein. Oh, I never read about that on NPR and New York Times on NPR. It must not be real." The same people that talked that way 2 years ago, 3 years ago, now all of a sudden, oh, Jeffrey Epstein. And the only person in the Epstein files is Trump. And Trump, Jeffrey Epstein proves that Trump is a sexual pervert. And that's why we need to have Bill Clinton, president again. Even though he's all over the files is also, it's annoying, the hypocrisy around the issue, but the issue is still real. And Trump very well could be very, very guilty of stuff related to it. I'm seeing the reports, right? And I think, the way Pam Bondi said they were going to release the list, and then there wasn't a list. There were no Epstein files. Now there are Epstein files. This is, I don't know. And honestly, the way Trump dissed the Supreme Court tonight, the way he was bowing before the military and kissing the boots of Marco Rubio and kissing the boots of the military, like, don't impeach me, please. And, and the way JD Vance was trying to see if he could get some, I don't know about that, Mr. Donald. JD Vance, there's kind of a social awkwardness about JD Vance that people talk about, that the way he uses his words, it's just something off, and that, I don't know. There was this like very religious cartoon that was on television back in the day about this, like, right. This there was like a claymation cartoon of this little boy and a dog, and the little boy was going to do something bad. And then the dog's name, it was like the boy's name was Davy. And the dog would say to I don't know, Davy. I don't know if that's the right thing to do there. And I was looking at JD Vance. That's what I was seeing on JD Vance's face all night. I don't know, Donald. I don't know. Are you sure about that? No illegal immigrants in the country? Are you sure? I don't know. I don't know. It was JD Vance was trying to distance himself from Trump with his facial expressions. That's what I was seeing on the face of JD Vance tonight. And also, Marco Rubio got a blowjob. I love you, Marco. You're so amazing. And Marco Rubio, while he's getting a blowjob, isn't going, "You're awesome, Donald." He's not smiling. He's, "Fuck you, Donald." That's scary. That's really scary. Like, why is Marco Rubio mad? And Trump usually honors the military. That's his thing. Republicans are closer to the military than Democrats. But tonight it was like medal awards show. And here's another military guy. And I'm going to give him, and another military guy, and another military guy. I love the military. Do you know how much I love the military? It was a bit much. And I don't know what's going on. There's reports about dissension in the ranks. The military doesn't want to attack Iran and is basically refusing to attack Iran. There's also reports that JD Vance and Tulsi Gabbard are opposed to striking Iran. Marco Rubio really wants to attack Iran, but then he looked mad tonight, like maybe he's not going to get what he wants. I don't know what's going on, to tell you the truth. I don't know what's going on. There is drama behind the scenes in the Trump administration. That is clear. That is clear. There's the whole thing about the pizzas and the guy tracking the pizzas to see if they're going to attack Iran. And there you go. So I also want to thank Robert, by the way, for he said, he said, nobody buys that DC is a dumpster, must be rolled into the trash, dare to struggle, dare to win. And thank you, Robert, for your support. It's appreciated. And then Yogi sent me a Cash App, and he said, for appreciating your objectivity, occupy the media, #occupy the media. Well, thank you, Yogi. I do appreciate that. I try to just keep a clear head about all these things. And if anybody else has any questions, this is kind of last call for any questions that people might have, right? If you have a question for me to answer, we're at the 2-hour mark, and it's 1:10 a.m. here in New York City. So I'm probably going to wrap this up pretty soon, but I will give you, I'm probably, gonna, give you, my final. I'm going to put on a song, and it'll be your last chance to ask me any questions that you might have. And then after that, I will say goodnight. So if you want to ask a question, please go to buymeacoffee.com/Caleb Maupin. So I'm going to put on some music. I don't know what music I should put on, but I'm going to put on one song, to give you all like one last chance to send in any questions you might have. Questions are always appreciated. And then after that, I will answer questions and then I'll be gone. So what song should I put on? I guess we'll put on The Ballad of Joe Stalin. Why not? The Ballad of Joe Stalin. This is by Ewan McCool, the British folk singer who was a communist, and he wrote The Ballad of Joe Stalin, all about Joe Stalin building infrastructure, making Russia a modern industrial country, defeating the Nazis. This is a favorite of ours on here, The Ballad of Joe Stalin. So while The Ballad of Joe Stalin is playing, buy me a coffee, send some questions. This is your last chance. All right. We're going to put on The Ballad of Joe Stalin. Then I'll answer any more questions that have come in, and then I'm out. All right, here we go.
Oh, Stalin was a mighty man, and a mighty man was he. He led the Soviet people on the road to victory. All through the revolution, he fought at Lenin's side, and they made a combination till the day that Lenin died. He said, come all you people, we must work with brain and hand. And then one day the Nazis came into the Soviet land. They plundered to the Volga, to Stalingrad. And then Joe Stalin said, come on, me boys, and kick them out again. Oh, Stalin was a southerner, in Georgia he was born, where the oranges grow thick and fast and fields of waving corn. And Stalin is a farmer, his fingers they are green, and he has planted the biggest crop the world has ever seen. One day he looked upon the map and frowned and shook his head. There's too much brown and not enough green, these were the words he said. We'll have to change the weather, boys, he said, and then he smiled. So let's begin by planting trees along 3,000 miles. So Stalin rolled his sleeves up then and said it's time to start. The Volga River and the Don, they are too far apart. I think we'd better join them, so come and help me, pal, and we'll build a mighty waterway, the Volga-Don Canal. Then Stalin went into the north, and there saw rivers three, all emptying their waters into the polar sea. Now that's not right, Joe Stalin said, these rivers, they are ours. We'll turn them round and make them work and make electric power. There was a range of mountains that were standing in the way, so Stalin put his hand out and smoothed them all away. For Joe, he is determined to make the land all green, and that's the biggest project that the world has ever seen. Oh, Stalin is a mighty man, and he has a mighty plan. He's harnessed nature to the plow to work for the good of man. He's hammered out the future, the fortune he has seen, and he's made the worker state the best the world has ever seen.
All righty. Okay. So Penny sent a Rumble rant, and she said Burkina Faso has saved 15 million francs due to preventive measures that reduced malaria cases. Yeah, and that's when you have a national healthcare service and you can incentivize, corporations don't make profits from treating illness. They make profit from, that the state saves money by preventing illness. And, Penny is an author, by the way. She wrote this really, really beautiful book, Africa's Flame, The Rise of Ibrahim Traore, which is great. Which goes into great detail about the construction projects that government has engaged in, the building that they have done. And it's kind of like what I just showed you there about Stalin. Ibrahim Traore is a builder. He's a builder, a constructor, and he's, a government of action. They kicked out the big monopolies and the French, and they've taken control of their economy, and they're organizing to build and to unleash human creativity and to construct. It's a government of action. They have a real government of action. I think Penny called it a progressive populist revolution. right? And this is a good book that Penny wrote about it. And yeah, they're preventing people from being ill. They're investing in the next generation. What Ibrahim Traore, this African leader, he is like the model of a great anti-imperialist. He's like an African Stalin. He's like another Gaddafi. Gaddafi was like this, a builder, a constructor. He's a great anti-imperialist. Ibrahim Traore is absolutely, absolutely awesome. And I believe it, right? And the whole union of Sahel states is a really great breakthrough. It's a chunk of the African continent that has established its sovereignty and is building itself up. One other thing from the speech I forgot to mention. I'll throw this out there. And again, last chance, folks. Rumble Rants, Cash App, Buy Me a Coffee. Just wanted to throw this out there. One thing from the speech that stood out also was the formerly transgender teenage girl, Sage. Did you notice her gesture? That was weird. The whole thing was, I guess, that her story was that her school had started giving her transgender stuff without telling her parents. She had run away from home, and then a judge wouldn't give custody to her parents because they didn't recognize her as being male, as being trans. But now she's back with her parents. Trump saved the day, and they put the video on her, and she had like her hair was black, but it also had like highlights in it. And she looked kind of goth. And then when the camera was on her, she did this with her hand, almost like she was making fun of Trump. Like, I don't agree with you. Like, it looked pretty clearly like maybe she wasn't on board with Trump. Her parents, I guess, appreciate Trump getting their custody back or whatever, but that was odd. When she went like this, like blah, 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 blah. You're full of shit, right? It was just odd to me. I don't know the whole story. And yeah, I don't know, right? Get angry with me if you want. I don't know what side of this you're on. I just watched it, right? And I will say it was a great thing when Trump, said, look, what was the quote exactly that Trump gave? I mean, I'm just saying this as an outsider. I know nothing about the case, right? I learned about it tonight. He said, what was the line? He said, they shouldn't be able to rip children from their parents' arms and transition them to another gender against their will. Right? That was the line. And none of the Democrats applauded. And Trump was like, really? You're not going to applaud for that? What was going on there? Why was she doing that? That was weird. That was just weird. I just don't know what was going on there. I would assume they wouldn't have brought her to the speech if she wasn't on board with Trump. Right. And she didn't feel, so I don't know why you're angry with me, for saying that. But, I just saw it. I'm just like, that was just odd. That whole moment was or again, there seemed to be a lot of that tonight, which makes me wonder if the people were trying to give themselves an out. JD Vance, Marco Rubio was getting praised by Trump and he was kind of not accepting it very well. And JD Vance was doing a lot of the, I don't know about that. And then, formerly transgender teenage girl does this when the camera's on her, like, Trump, you're just yapping. You're just full of it. Do these people know something we don't know? I mean, are they going to impeach Trump? I mean, that's the thing. If the Democrats get control of Congress, Trump said he will probably be impeached. So, I mean, is there something I just, I don't know. I don't know. That's all I can say. I just don't know what was going on there. Maybe she has some mental issues. Well, having gone through what she's been through, I mean, it sounds like she was transgender, ran away from home, was in another state, and a judge blocked her from her parents having custody. I mean, how could one not have a lot of trauma and be through that? And I'm not just saying because they're trans, or were trans, or were formerly trans. I'm not even saying that. I mean, having been through that as a young person, I mean, I can imagine one would have some issues. So I don't hold that against Sage, but I don't know what was going on there. And, and I'm not judging this based on what happened. I'm judging That's weird. It kicked me out of StreamYard, but I'm back. Why do gay libs have nothing but attacks that are absolutely stupid? At least one person was smuggled in. Okay, you have no clue. What? Huh? What are you talking about? Anyway, okay. I don't know. I think you're way behind. We're way past that part of the conversation. But anyway, anyhow, all right. I think he's talking about anyway, yeah, I think he's talking about something we talked about at like the beginning of the stream. He's way behind. So okay, he's not mad about Sage or the girl or whatever. I don't know what was going on with the girl, the boy, the finger gesture is called clock it. It means approval. Huh. Okay, so that was positive. She was supporting Trump because the facial expression she gave, I don't know what was going on there. I mean, that just struck me as an odd exchange. And again, maybe she was giving herself an out, or I don't know what was going on there. But anyhow, folks, listen, it has been fun. It's been a pleasure. So thanks for tuning in. Trump certainly gave me a lot to react to tonight. So yeah, my best wishes to everybody. My organization, the Center for Political Innovation, we're the real deal. We're building a real movement, to oppose imperialism, out of the movement to the masses. I would encourage you to become a member. We are having a national day of action around the country to say no war with Iran. So we're doing that on Saturday. So keep your eyes out for those videos. I've also written a number of books, right? I've written a number of books. I'm not going to go over all of them. If you want to join CPI, you can join here. And if you want to read my books, go to calebmaupinbooks.net. I've written a number of books about anti-imperialism. I wrote a book about Kamala Harris that made a big splash during the election. I do a lot of stuff. So if you're new, I know it seems like a lot of new people were here tonight. So that's good. Glad you watched. Thanks, everybody. I'll stream again soon. If not tomorrow night, the next night after that. So dare to struggle, dare to win. And hope you appreciated my analysis of Donald Trump's State of the Union. But anyhow, thanks, everybody. Good night.